Hey guys, tonight we're settling down somewhere strange, quiet, and just a little bit sour. You're tucked beneath layers of camel wool and heavy felt, curled up inside a round yurt planted in the middle of the Mongolian steppe. Outside, the night stretches forever. Just you, a whispering wind, and 1,000 miles of nothing. The stars above look close enough to grab, but your attention is rooted inside, where a squat leather sack is swaying gently from the yurt's central pole. It sloshes with something pale and fizzy, and every now and then someone gives it a hearty thump, like it owes them money. Welcome to the realm of airag, fermented mare's milk, the ancient drink of khans, herders, and people with very brave stomachs. You reach for a wooden bowl carved smooth by generations of use. The drink inside looks innocent, cloudy and white like watery yogurt, but the smell hits first, tangy, sharp, with a note of something suspiciously like wet leather. You hold your breath, take a cautious sip, and immediately question all your life choices. It's sour, effervescent, a little buttery, and somehow smoky. You're not sure whether to swallow or apologize. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wipe your mouth. Yeah, that's definitely going to sit in your stomach all night. But oddly enough, the aftertaste grows on you. There's something deeply satisfying about the warmth, the sting, the slightly alcoholic burn. For centuries, Mongolian herders have relied on this stuff, not just as a drink, but as a way of life. Your host grins, offering you more. You politely shake your head and instead glance around the yurt. It's snug and cluttered, but cozy. Saddles hang like forgotten stories along the walls, while bundles of herbs dry above the fire pit. The pouch of airag keeps swinging with the breeze, tied to a wooden pole overhead. That pouch isn't just decoration. It's essential to the drink's transformation. Mare's milk spoils fast. But ferment it? Now you've got something that can survive a trek across a desert. Historians still argue whether the Mongols invented this particular drink or merely perfected it. But either way, they drank it by the bucket and carried it in literal stomachs sewn into satchels. Charming. And before you judge them too harshly, remember, people once used crocodile dung as sunscreen. Yes, really. Ancient Egypt was wild. You're probably wondering how you even milk a horse in the first place. We'll get to that. Spoiler, it involves quick reflexes, strong wrists, and nerves of steel. Back to the milk. It wasn't just for drinking. The Mongols believed it cleansed the soul, strengthened the body, and connected them to the spirit of the land. There's even an old custom where a host sprinkles some on the ground before serving it, as a blessing, or maybe an apology in advance. Out here, far from cities or roads, airag is more than tradition. It's survival. Milk is plentiful in the summer when foals are born and grass is green, but it doesn't keep. So, they ferment it. The result? A beverage with 2-3% alcohol, low enough to hydrate you, high enough to make your afternoon chores more entertaining. You're led outside now, blinking beneath the stars. It's quiet in that sweeping, absolute way. No car horns, no podcasts, no emails. Just wind, crickets, and a horse snorting in its sleep. Somewhere nearby, a neighbor's yurt echoes with laughter. They're celebrating something. Birth, wedding, maybe just a really good batch of airag. You're invited, naturally. Out here, guests are sacred. You follow the glow of a fire and find bowls passed around like communion. A child sleeps in someone's arms. An old man plays a two-stringed fiddle, its sound thin and reedy. Everyone drinks from the same batch, the same bag, the same tradition. You feel a little dizzy. Is it the altitude, the alcohol, or the fact that you're somehow okay with drinking horse milk now? Funny how quickly you adapt. The drink still isn't exactly good, but it's memorable, comforting even. It's cold out here, and this strange, sour warmth has started to grow familiar. You hear a story about a traveler who insulted his host's airag and was chased into the desert on foot. The storyteller chuckles, but doesn't say whether it's true. You laugh along anyway. Best not to test your luck. By morning, you'll be sore, dry-mouthed, and craving plain water like never before. But for now, you lean back against a saddlebag, watch the embers fade, and feel the fermented milk swirl gently in your stomach like a reluctant roommate. Tomorrow, you'll learn how they actually get the milk and why no one ever volunteers for the job. You wake with the early creak of leather and the unmistakable snort of a mare, sharp, guttural, and way too close to your ear. A pale light spills into the yurt, and your host is already up, tying her boots with a yawn and grabbing a wooden pail like it's just another day. For her, it is. For you, it's the day you learn the true meaning of the phrase, easier said than done. Milking a horse is not like milking a cow. Not even close. For starters, mares produce milk only when they have a foal, and only for a few months each year. Also, they're extremely picky. You can't just walk up, say please, and hope for the best. No, you need the foal present, often suckling first, to trigger the mare's letdown reflex. Then, while the foal is nudged aside, gently, if you're lucky, the milker has about 90 seconds to get the job done. 90 seconds. That's shorter than most of your attention span. And it's not safe work. One wrong move, one squeaky bucket, one fly landing in the wrong place, and you're face first in the dirt with a hoof-shaped reminder of your mistake. You follow your host as she walks confidently toward her best mare. The foal toddles beside them, already learning the rhythm of life out here. Your host speaks softly to the animal, pats her neck, then crouches, pale in place. She moves quickly, expertly, in rhythm, her hands never hesitating. You try to imagine yourself doing the same thing, but the mare snorts again, and you take a respectful step back. Historians still argue whether Mongol women dominated this task because of physical skill, cultural assignment, or sheer bravery. But there's no question who's in charge here. In most traditional Mongol households, it's the women who milk, ferment, stir, and serve airag. It's not just a chore. It's a craft, a social role, a matter of pride. In fact, in some regions, it's considered shameful for a man to be seen milking a mare. Even Genghis Khan probably let someone else do it. Back at the yurt, the morning milking continues like a small symphony. Pails clanking, mares shifting, foals bleating impatiently. The milk is thin, almost translucent, and slightly sweet. It won't stay that way for long. As soon as it arrives, it's poured into the kokur, a large leather sack made from a cleaned and sewn horsehide, hanging near the door like a sleepy punching bag. And this is where things get weird. See, you don't just pour the milk in and leave it to sit. That's how you get a stomachache and an embarrassing legacy. No, fermented horse milk needs movement, constant movement. Traditional households stir the contents hundreds of times a day, not with a spoon, but by punching the bag, gently, repeatedly, like an overly polite boxer. So now you're watching an entire family take turns smacking a bag of milk. The children do it playfully. The adults do it while telling stories. The grandmother does it like she's resolving ancient grudges. There's something oddly meditative about it. You're invited to try. You give the kokur a half-hearted thump. It jostles. You pretend that counts. They laugh kindly. You try again, harder. The bag swings back and slaps your arm. Okay, fair enough. The bacteria inside the kokur are what really do the work, transforming sugars into alcohol, lactic acid, and carbonation. It's a biological party in there. Over time, that sweet, thin milk thickens slightly, grows tart, bubbles faintly, and gains that unmistakable zing that separates airag from spoiled milk. And here's the kicker. These leather sacks are rarely cleaned. They're seasoned, like a cast iron pan, or your grandpa's mysterious coffee thermos. The inside walls host generations of bacteria, passed down through years, even decades. If you wash it, you might kill the good stuff. So you don't. Modern biologists would probably faint. But hey, tradition's tradition. Quirky fact. In some areas, the kokur is hung from the door frame specifically so every person who enters or exits the yurt gives it a friendly nudge. It's like a housewarming tradition, but milkier. You sit on a low stool, cradling a bowl again. This morning's batch is young, less sour, more effervescent. It tastes vaguely like yogurt that went clubbing and came home at 4 a.m. Not unpleasant, just unexpected. A neighbor pops in to chat and share her own batch. You politely sip hers too. It's stronger, older, sharper. You try not to make a face, but it's like drinking fizzy cheese left on a radiator. She beams with pride. You say it's very complex, which is technically not a lie. There's something almost comforting about this bizarre daily ritual. The cycles of life, milk, ferment, share, repeat, tie everyone together. You realize that this isn't just food. It's identity, labor, survival, and celebration all wrapped into one slightly alcoholic tradition. As the sun climbs, you help carry pails back and forth. You're not very good at it, but no one minds. You're trying. And the horses are slowly beginning to tolerate your presence, which is about the best you can hope for. By mid-afternoon, the kokur has had its full share of punches. The liquid inside is frothy, tangy, and ready for the evening gathering. You can already hear the low notes of a Maureen Kur, Mongolia's horsehead fiddle, being tuned in the distance. But before the feast begins, you're going to learn about a man named Kublai and how he turned a humble drink into the centerpiece of imperial power and a fermented flex on the world stage. The sun dips low over the grasslands, casting long shadows across the endless steppe. You're still clutching your wooden bowl of airag, because frankly, at this point, it's become part of your identity. You've grown used to the taste, the fizz, the quiet rebellion your stomach whispers each time you take a sip. And now, seated cross-legged beside a crackling fire with the smoke curling into an orange sky, you're ready for something a little more theatrical. Enter Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis, ruler of the Yuan dynasty, and a man who knew how to throw a party. You blink, and suddenly you're not in a cozy yurt anymore. You're in the marble courtyard of a palace in Xanadu, robes brushing your ankles, the air humming with the sound of flutes and murmuring courtiers. There's a bowl in your hand again. Some things never change, but this time it's polished jade, and the airag inside is served cold, almost regal. Historians still argue whether Kublai genuinely loved airag or simply used it as a symbol of his nomadic roots, but one thing's clear. When this man drank, the world noticed. At state banquets, airag flowed like wine. Massive leather vats were lined up beside mountains of mutton and pyramids of dumplings. Foreign diplomats, often wrinkling their noses behind their fans, were expected to sip, smile, and somehow not insult the host. One Persian emissary reportedly described the taste as a storm of vinegar and fog. Probably not his best diplomatic moment. You imagine being one of those visitors, dressed in silks, trying to suppress a shiver as the fermented milk tingles down your throat. But refusing wasn't really an option. Drinking airag at court meant more than politeness. It was a gesture of loyalty to the empire, a way of saying, I understand your culture, even if you very much did not. Kublai used this drink to bridge his two worlds. On one hand, he built a Chinese-style dynasty, full of Confucian scholars, paper money, and urban bureaucracy. On the other, he kept his Mongol soul intact. Fast horses, yurts, and, yes, endless rivers of airag. It wasn't just political posturing. There's a story, possibly apocryphal, but delightfully absurd, about Kublai insisting that a river of fermented mare's milk be poured in front of his palace during a festival. Did it happen? No one's sure. But it's a strong contender for most lactose-intolerant hazard in world history. Of course, there was a hierarchy to these drinking feasts. The Khan drank first, from the finest bowl, and others followed in descending order of importance. You, humble guest that you are, would likely be seated near the back, still honored, but with a bowl that's been passed around a few times and probably has a questionable hair floating in it. You try not to think about that. Quirky fact time. In some accounts, it's said the Khan's airag was blessed by shamans before being served. A few drops might even be splashed into a fire or thrown skyward as an offering. So not only are you drinking horse milk, you're drinking holy horse milk. You feel incredibly spiritual all of a sudden. The feast rolls on. Dancers leap and spin to the beat of drums made from horsehide. Storytellers recount the lineage of Genghis Khan, each tale more exaggerated than the last. And every so often, servants make the rounds with fresh bowls, sloshing dangerously close to your lap. You overhear a Chinese scholar whispering something about rice wine being infinitely superior. He's quickly hushed by a Mongol general the size of a yurt flap. You wisely say nothing. You're starting to see the brilliance in this. Kublai took a drink that was rustic, earthy, and undeniably Mongol, and turned it into a tool of imperial diplomacy. It wasn't just a beverage, it was branding, a fermented identity. You don't serve Bordeaux or sake at a steppe banquet. You serve airag, and you make everyone love it or suffer the consequences. Even Marco Polo supposedly described the Mongols' milk habits with a kind of wide-eyed horror. He called it white wine, which is generous, and noted that it biteth the tongue, which is definitely accurate. You lean back and watch the party continue, eyes hazy with fermented warmth and historical wonder. The fire crackles, someone snores gently beside you, and the taste of ancient empire lingers faintly on your breath. The thing is, for all the Khan's pageantry and political showmanship, there's something oddly humble about the drink itself. It still comes from restless mares and sunburned herders. It still has to be stirred, aged, shared. No matter how many palaces it enters, it carries the wind of the steppe in every gulp. You're reminded that even emperors must rely on fermentation and patience, and people brave enough to dodge hooves twice a day for the sake of sour tradition. The stars above Xanadu seem to hum with stories, half true and half drunk. Your bowl is empty again. A servant offers a refill. You wave them off, smiling politely. 3 bowls in one evening is enough for any visitor, imperial or not. And as you stand, a little wobbly, you can't help but wonder, what's really inside that leather bag back at the yurt? What ancient cultures, microscopic battles, and collective histories are bubbling quietly in the dark? Tomorrow, you'll get a closer look, not at the milk this time, but at the sack itself. The true star of this fermented fantasy. You wake up wondering why your mouth tastes like fizzy suede. Then you remember. Airag. You also remember trying to toast a Mongol general last night with a bowl you may have held upside down. It's fine. You've been forgiven. Probably. The yurt is quiet again. Early morning kind of quiet, when only the coals glow and the wind outside hasn't made up its mind yet. The leather sack, however, is wide awake. It swings gently from the wooden post, like it never slept. Your host gives it a lazy thump as she walks by, a habitual motion done 1,000 times before breakfast. And there it is again, that slosh. A sound halfway between wet laundry and bubbling stew. Oddly comforting now. You get closer. The kokur, this mysterious, heroic leather vessel, is easily overlooked. But without it, there would be no airag, no fizzy horse milk cocktails, no fermented diplomacy, just spoiled milk and disappointed Khans. So today, you're giving the bag the respect it deserves. First, the basics. It's usually made from an entire horsehide, cleaned, stitched, and smoked until it resembles something between a waterbed and a medieval punching bag. Some are hung from the ceiling, others from a tripod stand near the yurt's entrance. All of them share one thing, a history soaked into every inch. And yes, they almost never get washed. You already knew that, but the reality still hits a little different up close. Historians still argue whether the original kokur design came from necessity or inherited wisdom. Was it invented out of desperation in a hot, milk-rich summer, or passed down from mysterious steppe ancestors who whispered, "Trust the bag"? Regardless, it works. The inside of the bag becomes home to a thriving community of beneficial bacteria and wild yeast, friendly microbes that turn lactose into lactic acid and ethanol. It's a tiny fermented civilization in there, and every batch gets a head start from the last one. Like sourdough, but more alive. You lean close and inhale. There's a tang, a funk, a complex bouquet of leather, dairy, and something alarmingly sharp that makes your eyebrows twitch. You step back instinctively. The bag grins in microbial delight. It turns out there are rules to using the kokur properly. The milk must be stirred, constantly. Mongolian herders traditionally say it needs to be agitated at least 500 times a day. Not 499, not 498. 500. You briefly consider the upper arm strength that requires and feel grateful for modern gym equipment. Then again, this bag is the gym. Children are often tasked with stirring. It's one of their first jobs. Some even play games where each visitor to the yurt has to punch the bag once. You imagine trying this at a housewarming party back home. "Hi, nice to meet you. Please smack our fermented horse sack." Social norms are different here. Quirky fact time. Some kokurs are passed down through generations, like fine china or that one cursed Tupperware your family never throws away. Others are ritually burned if they go bad, treated almost like living beings. In fact, some families whisper that a kokur dies if left untended for too long. You watch as today's milk is added, still warm from the mare. It disappears into the bag's dark mouth with a gentle gloop. Your host ties it shut, gives it 3 polite punches, and lets it hang again. Gravity helps. The movement helps. The bacteria help. And with time, the magic happens. Not all fermentation is equal, though. The conditions matter: temperature, humidity, the age of the bag, and the health of the milk. Some batches are bright and bubbly, others are flat and sour. A good bag is like a good sourdough starter, temperamental but rewarding. You take another bowl, now fully aware of the journey it's taken. You picture the mare, the milking, the punching, the microbes. It tastes sharper today, richer, almost like it's proud. You ask if you can try stirring. They nod. You step up and give the kokur a solid smack. It bounces. You try again. Harder this time. It smacks you back, just a little. You decide you're even. Your host chuckles and shows you the proper technique. A rhythmic kneading motion, not unlike churning butter with your fists. You follow along, and for a few minutes, you actually feel like you belong. There's something ancient about this act, something pre-civilized, almost sacred. No machines, no timers, no digital readouts. Just you, a leather sack, and bacteria older than most religions. You feel oddly peaceful, a little sweaty, mostly proud. In a corner, an old woman sips from her bowl and hums a tune. She's seen this all before. The seasons, the sacks, the strange foreigners with confused expressions. You nod respectfully and return to your seat, a little sore and slightly fermented yourself. Tonight, you'll taste another batch, this time from the next yurt over. You're told the neighbors are proud of their bag's personality. You're not entirely sure what that means, but you're definitely intrigued and a little terrified. Before the sun sets, you sneak one more look at the kokur. It hangs silently, a sack full of history, science, and unresolved dairy issues. You finally understand. It's not just a container. It's an ecosystem, a guardian, a partner in fermentation. And tomorrow, when you hit the road, it's coming with you. Because fermented horse milk doesn't stay in one place, and neither did the people who made it famous. The wheels creak and the hooves clop steadily beneath you as your cart rocks gently over the open steppe. It's late morning, and you're bundled under blankets, cradling a leather-wrapped jug of, what else? Airag. You've officially become a person who travels with fermented horse milk. It's a slippery slope from here to full-blown yurt ownership. Today, you're tagging along with a migrating family as they head toward summer pastures. The airag sloshes beside you, strapped into its leather pouch like a medieval seatbelt. The movement helps it ferment. And as it turns out, mobility isn't a problem. It's the point. Because this isn't just a drink. It's a nomad's fridge. Out on the Mongolian steppe, where the grass rolls for miles and shade is a rare luxury, you learn quickly that nothing lasts long, except fermented things. Milk, left to sit under the sun, will spoil in hours. But ferment it, and now you've got something shelf-stable, thirst-quenching, and just alcoholic enough to take the edge off a long ride. Historians still argue whether airag was created out of culinary curiosity or pure necessity. But the consensus is clear. It's a preservation marvel. Before coolers, before refrigeration, there was this: leather, bacteria, and the eternal bouncing of a cart across bumpy ground. You glance at the family's gear. There's no icebox, no pantry, just bundles, sacks, tools, and milk. Everything has a place. Everything has a purpose. The kokur hangs like a trusted companion, absorbing the rhythm of travel and slowly transforming liquid into legend. Quirky fact time. In some herding communities, a fresh batch of mare's milk might be poured into the same bag while it's being transported, stirring by jostling. That means the road itself helps make the drink. You sip thoughtfully. You are now complicit in the fermentation process. The sun climbs higher. Sweat beads on your forehead. The smell of warm leather and horse follows you like an affectionate ghost. You ask how long the trip is. The driver shrugs. "Until the grass is better," he says, matter-of-factly. Mobility is the lifeblood of this culture. Yurts are collapsible. Tools are foldable. Even food, it seems, must be ride-friendly. And airag fits right in. Unlike fresh cow's milk, which curdles and weeps in protest under the sun, fermented mare's milk holds steady. If anything, it improves with the journey. A little bumpiness makes it fizzier. A little warmth boosts fermentation. A little time, well, that's subjective. You stop to rest beside a shallow stream. Horses drink, children stretch, and the bag gets another lazy punch. You take a sip. The flavor has shifted again, more sour, more alive. It's wild how this thing keeps changing on you. You ask if airag ever goes too far. Your host chuckles and tells you about an old man who kept a jug sealed too long. When he opened it, it hissed like a snake and shot foam at the ceiling. He still drank it. He also saw visions for 3 days. "Good batch," the old man had said. Back on the cart, you're given a dried meat snack to balance the tang of the milk. It helps. Kind of. There's still something fundamentally rebellious about drinking anything that fizzes without a label or ingredients list. As the landscape rolls by, endless grass, distant hills, a hawk tracing lazy circles, you begin to appreciate just how interwoven this drink is with the nomadic way of life. It's not just portable. It's perfectly engineered for it. The fermentation is like time itself, always moving, never settled. No 2 batches taste quite the same. The same goes for each day on the steppe. One moment it's peaceful. The next, a sandstorm rolls in from nowhere and your cart smells like panic and regret. You pause at a cluster of other traveling families, an impromptu gathering. Someone has music. Someone else is already passing around bowls. The kokurs are exchanged like greetings. Everyone tastes everyone else's batch, and polite lies are told. "Very smooth," you say to one host whose airag tastes like melted cheese and vinegar had a bitter divorce. She beams with pride. You drink every drop. By dusk, you're drowsy again, your body rocked gently by hours of motion and microbial mischief. You lean against a stack of saddles, the smell of wool and horsehair around you like a fermented lullaby. You think of all the times you've used a fridge without thinking, all the expiration dates you've obeyed like gospel. And now, you're riding through the wilderness with milk that's been warm all day, bubbling and changing in a living leather pouch, and you're somehow okay with it. Maybe that's the magic, or maybe it's just the alcohol. You fall asleep briefly, waking only when the cart hits a rock and your precious airag sloshes dramatically. You hold it close. You're one of them now. Tomorrow, you'll explore how this drink isn't just traveling across pastures, but across empires. Because fermented mare's milk didn't stay tucked away in Mongolia. It rode west, east, and deep into places that had no idea what they were in for. The trail winds further west now, and the airag comes with you, sloshing gently at your side like a liquid passport. By this point, you're not just drinking it. You're defending it. Someone calls it strange, and you bristle like you've been insulted personally. You've become that person, the one who starts sentences with, "Actually, it's a very important part of Central Asian history." And honestly, you're not wrong. Because fermented horse milk didn't stay in Mongolia. It galloped across the steppes and spilled into nearly every culture the Mongol Empire touched, which, in case you forgot, was a lot of cultures. You're talking modern-day Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, parts of China, even as far west as Hungary. That's a whole lot of confused taste buds. But here's the interesting bit. They didn't all call it airag. In Turkic-speaking regions, like Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan, it became known as kumis. Slightly different word, slightly different process, same vibe. And yes, you're going to taste that too. You're seated now with a Kazakh herder named Timur, who serves you kumis in a ceramic cup instead of a wooden bowl. Small details, but they matter. The texture is a little thinner. The sourness leans harder. The fizz is softer, but sneakier. It tastes surprisingly refined, like airag's cousin who went to art school but still rides a horse on weekends. Historians still argue whether kumis evolved separately or is simply a regional variant of airag. There are strong feelings on both sides. Some scholars point to slight differences in fermentation technique, like storing it in ceramic versus leather. Others say the names are interchangeable, and it's all just fermented lactose in the end. But to the people here, the distinction matters. You ask Timur which one's better. He raises an eyebrow. Airag is for tourists, he says with a wink. You nod diplomatically and sip again. Still fizzy. Still alive. Quirky fact time. Kumis became so widespread that by the 19th century, Russian doctors were prescribing it as a health tonic. There were entire kumis spas in the Russian Empire, places where aristocrats would lounge around in silk robes, sipping fermented horse milk for their nerves. Imagine booking a luxury weekend to be pampered with sour livestock beverages. Now imagine paying extra for it. You find this both hilarious and entirely believable. Back on the road, you pass through a border region where languages blur and maps grow uncertain. A family here makes both airag and kumis, switching between terms depending on the guest. You try both. You pretend to notice the differences. You're pretty sure one tastes like yogurt soda and the other like sparkling vinegar with ambition. They ask your favorite. You panic and say, both. They cheer. Crisis averted. Cultural pride runs deep. This drink isn't just a beverage. It's identity in a bowl. Some communities even believe their version is spiritually superior. It's blessed. It's older. It's more authentic. The milk of their horses is, obviously, better trained. And while you sip and smile and nod, you can't help but admire the quiet confidence in all of it. You stop next in a Kyrgyz camp, nestled between snow-capped peaks. The yurts are taller here, the winds sharper. Their kumis is bracing, more sour, almost medicinal. You're told it's excellent for digestion, skin, mood, memory, and possibly heartbreak. You drink a little more, just in case. The kokur here is called a saba, a slightly different bag, shaped more like a wine bota. It's still leather, still unwashed, still swinging merrily from a tripod in the middle of everything. You watch it sway while someone sings a lullaby to a foal. The air smells like pine and milk and firewood. You think you might cry, but blame it on the wind. At dinner, a debate breaks out between elders over which type of mare produces the best kumis. One swears by white mares, another by mares born in spring. A third says it depends on the mood of the milker. No one agrees. Everyone drinks anyway. You realize something. Airag isn't just a Mongolian relic. It's a whole regional language. Different dialects, different accents, but always the same basic message: ferment or perish. By now, you've drunk so much of the stuff that you're starting to miss it when it's not in your hand. You ask where else kumis went after the empire's collapse. Your host tells you about Russian settlers who adopted it, about German botanists who documented it, and about modern-day hipsters in Europe who are now trying to bottle it for health stores. Because of course they are. You picture a bottle of kumis with a minimalist label. Organic equine sparkle, gluten-free. You try not to laugh and choke at the same time. As the stars rise over another pasture, you lie back with a full stomach, your mouth still tingling faintly from your fifth bowl. Or was it your sixth? Is it your... Somewhere in your sleepiness, you think about how strange it is that this single, funky beverage managed to tie together empires, tribes, and generations. Not with flags or armies, but with fermentation and a whole lot of patience. Tomorrow, you'll dig into why people didn't just drink it, but believed it could heal them, not just physically, but spiritually. And you'll find out why some still do. You wake to a strange feeling, not the usual fermented fizz in your gut, but something gentler. You stretch, blink, and notice someone handing you a warm bowl of airag, not chilled this time, not bubbling with excitement, but resting still and quiet in your palms. It's calming. "This one's for healing," your host murmurs. You sip. It's smoother, creamier, slightly less sour. The fizz is nearly gone. The sharp bite is muted. It's less of a party, more of a lullaby. And just like that, you step into the world of medicinal mare's milk. Yes, you heard that right. This wasn't just a drink to toast with at weddings or slosh around on carts. For centuries, people believed fermented horse milk could heal. Stomach problems, joint aches, depression, weak lungs, skin issues, bad dreams, broken hearts. You name it. Someone, somewhere, prescribed airag or kumis for it. Historians still argue whether these cures were based on real benefits or simply cultural placebo. But either way, people believed, and still do. Your host gestures for you to follow. You step into a side tent, cool, shaded, smelling faintly of juniper. A woman inside is seated cross-legged, eyes closed, humming. In front of her, a bowl of milk steams gently over coals. She stirs it slowly, whispering words you don't understand. This isn't dinner. This is a ritual. In traditional Mongol and Turkic medicine, milk from the horse, a strong, swift, sacred animal, was believed to carry vitality. Ferment it, and you unlock its hidden powers. Add herbs or chant prayers over it, and now it's medicine. You're offered a second sip, this one with a sprig of dried mountain thyme. The taste is wild, earthy, slightly numbing. You feel alert, or maybe just incredibly hydrated. Hard to say. Quirky fact. In some areas, fermented mare's milk was thought to balance your inner wind and bile, terms from traditional Central Asian medicine. Too much bile? You might be irritable or feverish. Too much wind? Anxiety, restlessness, cold limbs. The cure? Milk, obviously. You ask if people still believe in this today. Your host shrugs. Some do, some laugh, some drink and wait to see. In the early 20th century, Soviet doctors took a surprising interest in kumis. Not because they liked tradition, quite the opposite, but because their studies found that the drink actually had probiotic effects. It could help with digestion, boost appetite, maybe even fight infection. Kumis clinics popped up in Russia and Central Asia. Patients were prescribed daily cups and bed rest. Doctors called it kumisotherapy. You imagine a grumpy Soviet man in a white coat ordering someone to drink your bubbly horse yogurt. Medicine has never sounded so confusing. Even today, modern wellness enthusiasts have rediscovered kumis, especially in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. It's sold in roadside stands, poured into plastic soda bottles, and marketed as everything from an immune booster to a natural anti-inflammatory. You spot one with a hand-drawn label that reads, "Good for your brain and bones." You're not convinced, but you're curious. A healer you meet swears that certain mares make more peaceful milk than others. You have to feel the energy of the horse, she says. Some give milk that helps you sleep. Others, milk that helps you weep. You wonder if she's being poetic or scientific, or both. You hear about a herder who drinks airag every morning for his soul balance. He hasn't seen a doctor in 10 years, walks like a mountain goat, and claims he hasn't been sad since the 90s. You drink to that. But of course, not everyone's on board. Some modern doctors dismiss the health claims as outdated folklore. Others worry about unregulated fermentation and bacterial inconsistencies. Still others admit, grudgingly, that while kumis won't cure your chronic back pain, it's not the worst thing to drink, especially if the alternative is vodka. You're reminded that belief often outpaces biology. And maybe, when it comes to healing, that's part of the point. Outside the tent, a young girl sings as she stirs the kokur. She's been sick this week, nothing serious, but enough to keep her home from riding. Her grandmother prepares a warm batch, adds crushed herbs, and gently places a cloth over the opening like she's tucking in a baby. Later, the girl drinks. She smiles. Whether it's the microbes, the ritual, or the love in the preparation, you can't say, but she looks better already. You sit down beside her and sip your own bowl. It's not the best tasting one you've had, not by a long shot, but it feels kind, like something meant to stay with you, like a warm whisper to your insides. And there, in the fading light, you realize this isn't a drink made for fun or conquest. It's one made for recovery, for slowing down, for remembering that not every tradition has to be exciting to be meaningful. Tomorrow you'll dive into another overlooked part of this story. Who makes the milk? Who stirs it? Who serves it? Because behind every fermented bowl is a pair of hands, calloused, skilled, usually female, and a whole unspoken world of status, labor, and quiet power. It's another slow morning on the steppe, and you're starting to recognize the rhythm. Wake, stretch, sip. Try not to look confused while holding a bowl of fermented horse milk. But today, your attention shifts away from the drink itself and toward the hands that make it. Because here's the thing most tourists and history books often gloss over. Airag is women's work. In fact, nearly every step of its journey, from milking the mare to fermenting, stirring, tasting, sharing, is managed, monitored, and mastered by women. Not warriors, not khans, not traveling monks with dramatic haircuts, just strong, deliberate, fiercely competent women. You follow your host, a middle-aged herder named Sarnai, as she moves through the morning like someone born with a bowl in her hand. She calls the mares by name. Yes, they have names, and they actually respond. The foals follow, nuzzle, bleat. She works quickly, methodically. You offer to help. She smiles, gently hands you a rope, and tells you to just stand there and try not to be in the way. You oblige. Milking mares isn't glamorous, but it's highly skilled. You watch as Sarnai balances the foal's hunger with the timing of the milk flow, gently nudging the baby aside just long enough to collect what she needs. It's like a dance, fast, careful, slightly dangerous. Mares are moody, and if one kicks, it won't be a love tap. Historians still argue whether the centrality of women in airag making gave them elevated status in steppe society, or simply more chores. Mongol women certainly had more autonomy than their peers in many other cultures. They could ride, fight, own property, and lead families. But was that empowerment, or just practicality on horseback? Quirky fact: some 13th century European travelers, like William of Rubruck, were absolutely baffled by the sight of Mongol women commanding livestock, slapping around sacks of milk, and making key household decisions while their husbands just sat around polishing arrows. One wrote that the women appear to do all things, and the men merely look on. Classic. You watch as Sarnai finishes milking, walks back to the yurt, and begins the punching ritual with the kokur. She doesn't look at it. She just thumps it rhythmically while talking about weather, pasture, and some horse that keeps wandering off. It's effortless, like brushing your teeth while making dinner and scolding your cat. A girl nearby is learning the trade, maybe 12 or 13, face serious, hands already calloused. Sarnai corrects her grip on the ladle. The girl rolls her eyes but adjusts. You get the sense this isn't her first correction. You sit by the fire and drink with them. The men are elsewhere, repairing tack, checking fences, herding the cattle. But this is the kitchen, the chemistry lab, the social network. This is where taste is shaped, reputations are made, and gossip ferments as quickly as the milk. One woman brags that her airag made a guest cry with its strength. Another says hers once healed a traveler's cough. A third swears she saw a spirit rise from her kokur during a thunderstorm. You're not sure if you believe them. You're also not sure you don't. Here, airag isn't a product. It's a reflection of the maker. A good batch means skill, timing, patience, and understanding of both the animals and the microbes. A bad batch? That could mean embarrassment. Or worse, no one comes to visit. No one refills their bowl. You become the one with the sad, thin airag. Tragic. And so, women manage the process with quiet authority. They adjust fermentation times based on weather. They sample strategically, tweak portions, blend batches. One woman uses an old trick, adding a spoonful of last year's best airag to kickstart this season's batch, like heirloom yogurt with more sass. You ask if men ever help. Sarnai shrugs. Sometimes, she says, if we let them. Even today, in more modern parts of Mongolia, this gendered dynamic remains. Airag festivals are judged mostly by women. Farm co-ops assign women as the primary fermenters. In cities, younger women are reviving the tradition for commercial sale. Airag in bottles, airag in cafes, airag as branding. The drink is still deeply gendered, still rooted in care, craft, and credibility. You begin to wonder, has this always been the case? Were ancient steppe women carrying these same leather sacks, stirring with the same wooden sticks, debating the same sourness over the same fires? It's likely. Archaeological finds from Scythian and early Turkic graves show women buried with milk vessels, ladles, and symbolic animal bones, tools of fermentation and identity. One elder tells you her grandmother taught her everything she knew through stories. A good airag will sing if you stir it right, she says. A bad one just sulks. You can't help but smile. You're pretty sure your last attempt was sulking hard. As the day winds down, the women gather under a canvas awning and drink slowly. Laughter rises in waves. You're invited to sit, but warned not to speak unless you've made at least one decent batch. You sip in silence, wisely. By the end of the evening, you're watching a quiet toast between two sisters. They don't say much. They just raise their bowls, bump rims, and drink. It's a small moment, but it feels ancient. Tomorrow, you'll follow the drinks path into the modern world. Trendy cafes, bottled attempts, and why fermented mare's milk is now trying to get 5-star Google reviews. It's mid-morning in Ulaanbaatar, and the air smells less like horses and more like car exhaust and freshly baked pastries. You're no longer on the steppe. You're in the city now, dodging buses, spotting street murals, and somehow still holding a bottle of airag. Because, yes, even here, the drink has found a new pasture. You duck into a trendy little cafe with exposed wood beams, Edison bulbs, and a hand-drawn chalkboard sign that reads, "Raw Mare's Milk Smoothies, Ancient Power, Modern Vibe." You laugh. Then you realize they're serious. The girl behind the counter has perfectly round glasses and a minimalist tattoo of a horse on her wrist. You order something called a kumis sunrise, fermented mare's milk blended with sea buckthorn, honey, and a pinch of turmeric. It's fizzy, citrusy, and just sour enough to remind you of that one time a leather bag burped at you in a yurt. Welcome to the airag Renaissance, because even in the age of bubble tea and almond milk, airag refuses to retire. It's being rebranded, reinvented, and yes, repackaged. You wander into a boutique health store nearby and find chilled kumis in glass bottles with sleek Nordic-style fonts. Equine Elixir, one label reads. Probiotic Spark. Gut Hero. It costs more than a decent lunch. You're amused, confused, and maybe slightly impressed. Historians still argue whether this resurgence is driven by genuine cultural revival or trendy wellness marketing. Some call it cultural pride. Others call it lactose-forward capitalism. But either way, the result is the same. Fermented horse milk is back, and it's wearing sunglasses. You ask around. A young entrepreneur explains that demand for bottled airag is rising among urban professionals. They want something ancestral but Instagrammable, she says, handing you a sample. It tastes okay. A little too polished, maybe. Like the sharp edges have been sanded off, but still familiar. You meet another producer who insists that traditional methods are non-negotiable. No steel vats, he says. No pasteurization. If the concours doesn't smell slightly angry, it's not real. He sells his bottles from the trunk of his car and refuses to get a website. You buy too. Quirky fact. There are now airag sommeliers. Yes, actual experts who can identify region, fermentation method, and even the mare's diet just from taste. You listen to one describe a batch as boldly acidic, with earthy notes and a slightly nostalgic finish. You feel like you're at a wine tasting, except everyone smells faintly of wool and optimism. There's also a growing market overseas. In Kazakhstan, companies are exporting pasteurized kumis to European health stores. In Korea, high-end restaurants offer it as part of traditional tasting menus. And in parts of Germany, it's sold in pharmacies as a probiotic supplement recommended for digestion and mild inflammation. Some startup even tried to launch a kumis-based skincare line. The idea didn't exactly catch fire, but it lives on in one poorly translated YouTube ad where a woman in a white coat gently pats her face with something suspiciously yogurt-like. And of course, the internet has opinions. You scroll through a review thread. Tastes like sparkling cheese but weirdly refreshing. Better than kombucha, fizzier than kefir. Drank this on a dare. Now I'm lactose intolerant and confused. Would try again, but only if seated and emotionally stable. You chuckle, sipping your cafe-blended airag, which now comes with a biodegradable paper straw and optional chia seeds. But it's not all fusion drinks and artisan packaging. Outside the city, traditional herders still produce airag the old way, on horseback, in leather bags, stirred by hand, made with pride. And some aren't too thrilled about the modern makeover. You visit a community yurt on the edge of town, where elders gather to share stories and drink the real stuff. One man scoffs at the bottled versions. They look nice, but they don't sing, he says. You nod like you understand what that means. You kind of do. Here, the airag is sharp, unruly, unapologetically alive. You take a sip, and it punches you right in the memory. You realize something. This drink doesn't belong to cafes or co-ops or export licenses. It belongs to movement, to people, to tradition. The fact that it can be bottled doesn't mean it should be. And yet, the fact that it can be bottled also means it's surviving, adapting, like it always has. Airag has been many things: survival strategy, imperial flex, sacred medicine, and now, eco-conscious beverage trend. It's a shapeshifter, a cultural chameleon, a fizzy reminder that the past doesn't just sit in museums. Sometimes it comes with a straw. You sip again. You sip again. Tomorrow, you'll step into a quieter part of this journey. Not about the drink, but about the ritual around it. The bowls passed between friends, the offerings to spirits, the silent rules that still guide each shared sip. Because airag isn't just swallowed, it's offered. The airag is ready again, resting in its wooden bowl like it's always belonged there. But this time, no one drinks right away. It just sits. A moment of quiet reverence hangs in the air. You're learning. Fermented horse milk isn't just a beverage. It's a ritual. Your host lifts the bowl, extends it toward the sky, and murmurs a few words. You don't catch the meaning, but the intention is clear. A toast? A prayer? An offering? Yes. In Mongolian tradition, and in many steppe cultures, before the first sip, a small portion of airag is flicked skyward. Not spilled. Flicked. It's for the spirits, for the sky, for the ancestors who rode long before you arrived with your tourist backpack and questionable sunscreen. You watch the droplets arc and disappear. It feels old. It feels right. This moment, quiet and ceremonial, is part of what gives airag its cultural gravity. It's not something you just chug during halftime. It has presence. You don't gulp it, you receive it. You take your bowl with both hands, because that's the rule. Always both hands. Anything less is considered rude, or at the very least, lazy. Even a child knows this. The bowl itself is wooden, wide, and shallow. It smells like cedar and milk and memory. Each one is slightly different. Some are hand-carved with little horse heads or family symbols. Some are smooth from generations of use. One old woman proudly tells you her bowl belonged to her grandmother, who served it to Soviet officers with great disgust and perfect manners. You try your first sip, then another. You've lost count of how many different airags you've tried, but this one tastes ceremonial, less fizzy, more balanced, like it knows it's being watched. Historians still argue whether these rituals came from animist beliefs, Buddhist influence, or something even older, some primal human instinct to share what nourishes. But no matter the origin, the effect is undeniable. Airag isn't just consumed. It's participated in. You learn there are other rules too, quiet ones, passed down more by gesture than explanation. Never pour your own bowl unless explicitly told to. Never drink before the eldest does. Always accept the bowl, even if you don't plan to finish it. A polite sip is better than a rude refusal. And then there are the toasts. Oh, the toasts. Some are long, elaborate poems that invoke ancestors, weather, and the good temperament of the horses. Others are simple wishes. For peace, for safe travels, for healthy foals, and a productive fermentation season. You're asked to make one. You panic. You blurt out something like, "May your kokur never sulk." It earns a laugh. You're safe. For now. Quirky fact. In some families, the ritual of airag sharing is tied directly to household status. The best bowls go to guests. The first sip to the honored elder. Children must wait. And in special cases, weddings, blessings, funerals, airag is even poured onto the ground as a formal offering. Not wasteful. Sacred. At one gathering, you witness a small shrine tucked into a yurt corner. A ladleful of airag is placed in a carved dish beneath an ancestral portrait. A few grains of barley are added. A whisper. Then nothing. The silence afterward says more than the ritual itself. You begin to see the drink differently, not as a liquid in motion, but as a ceremony in liquid. It doesn't just quench thirst. It affirms relationships. It draws circles around people, family, friend, guest, stranger, and says, "You're included now." There's something disarming about it. You sit with people you've never met, speak languages you barely understand, and yet, when the bowl is passed to you, warm, fizzy, alive, you feel like you belong. You hear a story from an elder about a time when two rival clans met in a field, tension thick as smoke. Before swords were drawn, one matriarch brought out a fresh bowl of airag. She handed it to the other leader, both hands, quiet smile. He drank. The fighting paused. They negotiated for hours. No one died that day. Was it the milk? Was it the ritual? Or just the soft power of fermented diplomacy? You don't know, but you believe it. At sunset, you watch a quiet farewell. A traveler packs his saddle, readjusts his bags. Before he mounts, a woman hands him a leather flask filled with airag. Not a word is spoken. He touches his forehead to hers. Then he rides. The flask bounces behind him. Even on the move, the ritual continues. Tomorrow, you'll step away from the tradition and into something stranger. A future full of lab-grown microbes, fermentation startups, and scientists trying to decode the genome of airag itself. Because apparently, even horse milk can get digitized. The lab smells like ethanol, latex gloves, and mare's milk. Somehow. Even here, surrounded by microscopes and blinking machines, the ghost of the steppe still lingers, disguised in petri dishes and sterilized sample jars. You've made it. From yurt to biotech. From cocour to centrifuge. Welcome to the future of airag. It starts with a door labeled Fermentation Research Wing in an otherwise forgettable university building in Ulaanbaatar. Inside, white-coated researchers move like monks in a monastery, except instead of scrolls, they hold pipettes. One greets you cheerfully and offers a taste of lab-purified kumis. It comes in a sterile plastic cup and smells like someone carbonated a biology textbook. You drink it anyway. It's sharp and suspiciously clean. Because this is the new frontier, isolating the exact bacteria and yeast strains responsible for airag's signature tang and fizz. One researcher shows you a printout that looks like abstract art, colored spikes and bars that apparently represent Lactobacillus helveticus, Streptococcus thermophilus, and a mysterious strain no one has fully identified yet, but which they're lovingly calling Steppe Ghost 1A. Historians still argue whether modernizing fermentation like this enhances the tradition or kills it. Is airag still airag without the sun, sweat, and leather? Or is this the natural evolution? New vessels for ancient bugs. You meet a young scientist who thinks he's cracked the perfect commercial airag recipe. We can freeze-dry the cultures, ship them globally, and just add fresh mare's milk, he says proudly. You ask where city people are supposed to find mare's milk. He pauses. We're working on that. Quirky fact. One biotech company in Europe is developing synthetic mare's milk using cow milk and plant enzymes. Their slogan? Horse-free kumis, same tang, less gallop. You can't tell if it's brilliant or sacrilegious. Back at the university, another lab is testing how airag affects gut microbiomes. Early studies suggest the drink might be rich in psychobiotics, bacteria that could influence mood, stress, and maybe even sleep. A postdoc shows you data points and MRI scans. You smile and nod. None of it looks like milk, but it all tastes like potential. They tell you the next goal is full genome sequencing of traditional cocour samples, analyzing the DNA of the microbes passed down through generations. Think about that. Every bag on the steppe is basically a microbial family tree, sloshing along with its own ecosystem of invisible ancestors. You suddenly feel weirdly sentimental about bacteria. You ask if there's any way to replicate that rich complexity in a lab. No, the lead researcher says flatly. We can get close, but the wildness is part of the flavor. That's the part you can't bottle. Still, they try. In another room, a startup is prototyping a stainless steel fermentation chamber shaped like a cocour, with internal paddles that mimic the traditional punching motion. It's hooked up to a timer and motor. You watch it shudder and slosh like a steampunk washing machine. You try not to laugh. You fail. But then you taste the result. And it's pretty good. Maybe a little too perfect, too tame, but definitely recognizable. You imagine this being served on flight someday. Would you like water, juice, or wild mare's milk, lightly fermented in a smart barrel? You ask what the end game is. Preservation, one researcher says. Airag is fragile. Global warming, urbanization, even modern veterinary medicine, it all changes the milk. We want to keep a snapshot, a living archive. And that's when it hits you. This isn't just about innovation. It's about memory. The future of airag may involve freeze-dried cultures, powdered starter kits, and designer cocours made of BPA-free silicone. But at its core, it's still the same story. A drink that defies geography, logic, and pasteurization. A drink that carries tradition not just in flavor, but in feeling. Before you leave the lab, someone hands you a vial of freeze-dried airag starter. Just add milk, they say. You smile and pocket it. You're not sure when or how you'll use it. But something tells you that one day, somewhere far from the steppe, you'll try. Maybe you'll fail. Maybe it'll fizz. Maybe you'll raise a bowl to the sky and flick a little toward the ceiling, just to be safe. Tomorrow, you'll return to the people who still live the tradition, who don't care about genomes or barcodes, but who know how airag feels when it's made right. You'll see what happens when that knowledge nears extinction, and why it refuses to vanish. Because airag isn't just fermenting in bags or labs, it's fermenting in memory. The fire is low, the stars are out, and the milk is gently sloshing in its bag. Again. You've returned to the steppe where all this started, and everything smells like grass, smoke, leather, and time. You're back with Sarnai, the matriarch you met before. Her hands are still firm, her airag still fizzing. But something's shifted. Her granddaughter sits nearby, distracted by her phone, only half listening as Sarnai stirs the cocour. You hear a familiar sound, a game notification, maybe TikTok, and it feels like the entire steppe sighs. The bag sways quietly. No one says anything for a while, because this is what they don't put on the bottles in boutique stores or in the fermentation lab protocols. The people who know airag are growing older, and many of them worry that what they hold, this bubbling, living art, isn't being passed down fast enough. Sarnai eventually breaks the silence. She drinks it, she says with a shrug, nodding toward her granddaughter. But she doesn't know why. You do now, or at least more than when you arrived. You've tasted airag in 10 forms, watched it flicked to the sky, watched it bottled in labs, heard it praised as sacred, criticized as stinky, and whispered over like a secret. And yet, for all the flavor profiles and probiotic charts, what sticks with you is this: the quiet, persistent care required to make it. Historians still argue whether nomadic cultures like this one are truly fading or simply transforming. Some point to disappearing herding routes, changing diets, and younger generations leaving for cities. Others say, no, look closer. The yurts are still here. The mares still foal. The milk still ferments. You ask Sarnai what she thinks. She doesn't answer directly. Instead, she hands you the ladle. You freeze. You've seen it passed hand to hand like a sacred torch. You've watched it used to stir life into milk, to measure time in swings and swishes, to discipline flavor and memory. And now it's yours. For a moment. You stir. Slowly. Hesitantly. The bag shifts and breathes under your hand. The scent is sharp and familiar. Alive. You try to match the rhythm you've seen. Steady. Sure. Loving. It's awkward at first, but not impossible. Quirky fact. In some families, the ladle itself is named. Passed down. Treated with the same reverence as a family heirloom or a musical instrument. You ask if this one has a name. Tsog, Sarnai says. It means spark. You nod. That feels right. The granddaughter glances up from her phone and watches you. You think she might ask for a turn. You hope she does. But for now, she just watches. You sit together in the glow of the fire, stirring milk, sipping slowly, saying very little. The sound of hooves in the distance, the soft hiss of fermenting breath, the low wind over grass. It all settles around you like a blanket. You think of the monks who carried airag west, of the Russians who turned it into medicine, of the biotech engineers giving it a QR code, of the wedding toasts and the funeral prayers, of the little girl healed by time-scented milk, of the bowl flicked skyward for spirits you no longer doubt. And you wonder, how many other traditions in the world have survived not through empires or laws, but through quiet hands, steady ladles, and people who just kept doing it. That's the real preservation. Not the freeze-dried packets, not the Google reviews. Just this, the act of making, of remembering, of sharing, bowl by bowl. Eventually, you stop stirring. Sarnai takes the ladle back without a word and continues like you were never there. But you were. And you'll carry that rhythm, that spark, far beyond this tent. Maybe someday you'll return. Or maybe, somewhere far away, you'll taste something. Strange, sour, fizzy, and remember. You'll smile. You'll flick a drop to the sky. You'll tell someone, it's called airag. Let me tell you what it means.